to spend 1 hour just working on this excalidraw chart here. I'm gonna follow the code on the point that I stopped here last time. And then I'm just gonna look into the functions and draw connections on the flowcharts. I'm gonna do this for 1 hour. Just gonna wait to see stream. And maybe I should show the flowcharts up until this point. So I'm trying to study this KIO project, which is a project that Dolphin uses. Dolphin is a file explorer on Linux. It's basically this GitHub repo here, and it creates this stuff here and uses Qt, which is a library on C++ for drawing stuff on the screen. And uses KIO for the file management, like from the behind the scenes, from the backend of this stuff. As far as I understand now, it is the library that communicates with the kernel, which is this other repository here, this one. And this uses Qt as well. So what I'm trying to do is create, not to create, just to improve the file editor file system that they have on Godot, which is a component that shows the file system. And in order to do this, I'm trying to study this one to see if I understand what they do from first principles, and then implement the same stuff on Godot. It's kind of complicated though, so like I might have to settle for like a very simplified version on Godot, and then think about optimizations like later on, because I don't really care. Like it's an annoying problem to me because it's not the stuff that I'm trying to do. It's just something that is on the way of what I'm trying to do. So I'm just trying to get this done. So I might not be able to implement everything. But the way that it works is that it starts off on the Dolphin framework. It's going to start off opening the root of the folder. So like this directory is selected on the file explorer. Using this open URL function, which comes from the core dir lister class, which uses this cache class, which is probably for caching, obviously, like the name sounds, but I don't know really well how it works because it uses a Qt library. I think it uses Qt thread local storage or something like that. Then this one calls list dir, and this is basically the flow of functions. So I was gonna call this new job. So every time that you open, every time you open a directory or a tab, because the Explorer has multiple tabs, like it allows you to open multiple tabs inside of the Explorer. So every time you open a tab, it's gonna open a URL, and it's probably gonna create this new job, which is basically a way. It's similar to Python, where you have I think a method class, which is a method inside of a class that is used to initialize an instance of the class. That's basically how this works. So this is gonna initialize a private job, a least private job, I think, or a private job. This part I think is not very useful for what I'm trying to do because it's more related to the UI. But it's going to use the job that initializes here to call these functions here, which are related to Qt as well, I think. Like they're probably responsible for some of the front end. And I think here I'm doing this one calls this other function, I think, and then this one. It's here. It has I'm writing I'm following the path of the constructors, because on the functions I think nothing interesting happens. I think most of the functionality is inside of the constructors, which is usually a pattern that I've noticed from like the projects that I've seen so far. Everything that draws stuff to the string, or like on game programming or stuff like that, is gonna follow an object-oriented paradigm, which is basically creating classes and then connecting the classes through signals. So the connection of signals is the observer pattern, the way that they call it. And the relationship between classes is going to be object-oriented programming. So most of the functionality, the behavior of each part of the stuff you see on the screen is decided by the functionality of the class, because the components of the visualization are like islands that are managed by the classes you have. So the functionality inside of the island is like the functionality created inside of the class. And then to bridge the gap between the different islands, you use the observer pattern, which is just using functions to connect different objects. So this one is gonna create another this job private, and I wrote down the constructor here, I think. It just passes the information through the functions, through the arguments on the initialization. And then here, I think I decided to do the hierarchy because that's where the stuff is gonna be. So the constructor chain, I basically followed the hierarchy. So I think the first one is the least job. Also, this is probably here. I think probably put the name of the classes just you have here, but the implementation of the constructors I think is gonna be here. So this one initializes simple job. Then simple job is gonna call this function. I think this one is kind of weird, but according to ChatGPT, this function here is like something that Qt does, which honestly I really don't like. I don't like the design of Qt so far because I think it's overly complicated. I like the design of Godot's a lot more, but I think that might be understandable because it's a library that exists for a very long time. But I think what they do is something called the pimple pattern, which is the pointer implementation. You create a pointer to the class, I think, inside of the class, and then you do all the functionality of the class through that pointer. So it's kind of like you're isolating the class through the pointer that you initialize inside of the class. And because they do it like this, they have this function here that allows you to access the pointer from the class. As far as I understand, I'm not really sure if that's what is going on. But then this one is going to call the job, simple job init, which comes from simple job private. I think this is the one that has the functionality. Yeah, so this is the one that matters. This one is going to initialize job. Job is like the K composite job, which comes from another repository, which I think comes from this one. I don't remember if it's from this one or the other one, but it does come from another repository. Maybe it's this. Oh, this is something that someone shared with me that I saw later. I'm not reading the chats as I stream, but later, once I finished streaming last time, there was a link on the Twitch chat, and someone shared this with me. So I think that they were trying to say that this part here is the one that is responsible for implementing the optimizations through loaded directory, but I'm not really sure if that makes sense. I think that's the part that matters the most is the workers there. It's probably going to be related to Qt as well. Or Qt, however you say that. So I'm going to close this. This is also from the list job private. So it might be here, but I'm just gonna, I think I left this open so I can show the string, the next string. So this doesn't do anything. It just initializes the pointer and sets capabilities, which I don't know what it does, but. So the K composite job is the base class of the jobs, I think, and then the other ones that derive from them are going to be like specializations of different jobs. So I think the main functionality happens here when it calls the simple job init. So this one is going to initialize the scheduler in the end here, do job. I think the scheduler is the thing that is the class that is responsible for managing the jobs, probably. I think it does something through the timer as well. There's a signal, I think, that connects through the timer. Godot has a similar pattern. I think that the way that is, I'm not 100% sure if that's what's happening here, but I think that's probably what is happening. And Godot has something similar on the editor class. We basically have a class that works as a timer, and then it allows you to have one-shot timers. So like from the moment you select a time frame, then from the moment you initialize the class, it's going to wait for that time, and then it's going to send a signal. And then there's going to be a callback function that runs after the signal is ran. And then you have the option to either put it one shot, which means that it's not going to send the signal anymore, just the first time. And the other option is you continue to send the signal through that time interval. So I think it's something similar that they're doing here. But the one that I was looking at is this job, which this is another part that it could be wrong because I'm using F12 on VS Code, which usually goes to the definition of the function. So select whatever place you want, and then you press F12, and usually it goes to the right place. So here, if I press F12, it goes to here. But sometimes it goes to the wrong place, so it could be wrong there. But I think it's correct. So it seems that this function is going to call this other one from the private scheduler. And then this one, I think, are the first times that there's something that actually matters for the stuff that I'm trying to understand. So I think that one of them is gonna be this function here, proto-q, which I think this is the one that is gonna eventually initialize the worker. Yeah. So the first function that I call here, which initializes proto. So queue, obviously, I think is something related to putting the jobs on the queue. And then it's probably gonna manage I think the scheduler probably manages the queue, this proto queue here. The proto queue probably has logic to help organize what jobs, like the priority of jobs, or something like this. And then the worker is gonna be one that is initialized inside of the proto queue, probably. But I think proto queue is from scheduler private as well. But it's another class. So I'm not really sure their relationship yet. But there's a bunch of stuff from like some data from the configuration, like the max workers. Like these parts I'm not like I don't know how I'm gonna do this on Godot, if it's necessary to put this stuff here. But I assume that's like the thing that is kind of annoying is that this works for Linux. So because Godot is supposed to like support all the platforms in the way that they done it, like it's gonna be annoying, I think, to. So it might be easier, like the way that they design the classes on Godot is that usually you're gonna have the base class that is like a generic version of the functionality, and then you're gonna have different derived classes that work for different operational systems, and that's how they make it easy to implement, to make the code work for several different platforms. So, like if I try to translate this stuff and create the job class, it might be very annoying to make it work with Windows and Mac, especially Mac OS. And I might like I want to avoid doing like creating a virtual box to like create virtual machines from Linux and Mac just to test this stuff. So because I think it's a waste of time because I don't really care about this, like I said before. So it might be a better idea to try to use the dir access class in Godot. Dir access is the class that they use to manage the directories, and that class communicates with the OS class, which is the operating system class. It has a bunch of functionality to manage the operating systems. So I have to see if I can use both of those classes to like just do some incremental optimization first, and then as the easiest way that I'm thinking about there, just changing the moment you send the signal from the backend to the front end, because the signal is the stuff that matters on Godot to show the files. So the backend loads the directory and then sends the signal to the front end, and the front end shows the files. The most complicated part is synchronizing the interactions of the front end with the backend. I think I didn't go over this function. Yeah, this is after it creates the job, I think. So it's so I'm gonna go over in these ones. I think I just copy the code because it's easier. So before this stuff, I think it's just configurations. Procure constructor. So I think that it's gonna be this part here that goes here. Then the constructor is gonna. Yeah, this is the part that that I talk about the signal, I think. So it sets up the signal in the scheduler there, probably, and then it's gonna call this start a job function after the timer. So I think this queue timer that has here that is connecting the signal. So the signal is another kind of a thing that is kind of annoying to understand from Qt because of the implementation of the object class. But it's a function. So in Qt, I think it's just the same as Godot. Everything, the base class is an object, which is like the generic version of the components you're going to show on the screen. And then everything else is going to be a derived class that specializes the behavior on top of that thing, top of the object. And the signal, just like in Godot, is a function from the object class, which the name is connect. I think on Godot is also connect. So the first thing is going to be the first is the class that sends the signal, I think. Then you're gonna have this part is the one that is very confusing because I think it's based on the implementation of the class. So you can put a macro inside of the class called qSignal, I think, and qSlots. So the signals are like the messages you're gonna send. So every time you use q underscore emit or either that or emit, I forgot the exact pattern. But then you send, it's kind of like the name of the signal, the second argument. Then the third one is going to be what function is listening. It's going to be connecting to the signal. So the function that is going to run the callback. In this case, this instance, which will be protocq, and then the callback function. But the part that is very weird is so it's basically this thing here. So I think that these lots are the callback functions that you want to subscribe to the signal. So you put this stuff here, which probably comes from Qt. It's something that is a macro probably that Qt uses. And then this macro probably has a bunch of stuff that like has some code that's going to be basically copy pasted whatever you put the macro, and it's going to allow you to subscribe these signals and slots. The signals you're going to emit are Qt signals, I think, and the callback functions you want to eventually subscribe are Qt slots. Yeah, so basically every time you put this, but this is the part that is very weird because the way that it is here is like a function. But I think that, yeah, the function doesn't have a declaration. So it's just like a name of the function. And then you use by, I think it's qt emit or something like that. And then you put like the name of the function. The part that I don't understand very well is the arguments, I think. It's whether or not it's gonna, I think that the argument, if you want to send arguments, you probably declare arguments as part of this function here. And then those are the arguments that the callback is going to receive. But I think that both on Godot and on Qt, this part's very annoying because of the way that C++ works. So like the difficult part about this, I think it's just a difficult problem because of the types. Since you don't know what types are going to be sent, like what is going to be the type of the signal. I'm not really sure if the type of the signal matters, but the type of the arguments, the type of the arguments definitely matter. So since you don't know what's going to be the type of the arguments, then it's very annoying to figure out how to translate the types between the thing that is emitting the signal and the thing that's going to call back the function. So I'm gonna, and now the decision how to, I think I have to put these two different things here. So I just copy pasted the start a job function. So I think that the stuff that matters, maybe I'll do it separately than all of these other ones. So I think that the manager matters. I have to think about in the context of what I want to translate into Godot. So I have to see, the problem is, how does it initialize this stuff? It will do just the function. Because I don't really care, like I said before, about this stuff. I just care about extracting the fundamental principles and then figuring out how to implement the same principles on Godot. So I have to remember, I have to try to clarify what parts matter actually to this. So I think that this one probably is gonna check just yeah. So if it doesn't have, so I think that this is mostly true. Maybe I should write this down there. We should check to see if there is already a worker for that job. Maybe take work for the job. I think I should do a separate thing. Like I think the first that come the stuff that comes before this, I think it doesn't really matter to what I'm trying to do. So I should probably create a separate flowchart and just connect. I was thinking about this already before. I think that the stuff that matters the most is the queue, and the workers. And the problem is that I think they use a different, they do things in a different way on Qt. So I think that the queue URL there is different because I think that this is a part that I'm not 100% sure, but I think that they are doing something like underneath the operational system that works in a different way than Godot. So like Godot uses basically string, I think, string and string name classes on the dir axis, and it gets the paths from the operational system using the dir axis, I think. And Qt probably does something like I think that what they're probably doing is creating an IPC, which is an inter-process communication system, which uses kind of like a lower level API to communicate directly with the kernel. I think that's something like this, but I don't know obviously because I haven't looked into it yet. I think this what this is gonna do is gonna check just see if there's already a worker for the job, maybe. It's kind of it's different because I was reading. Oh, maybe I should. Yeah. So I was reading a book, and then I realized that I was taking the pictures of the book, and then I realized that I already have the. I found the source code for the book, then I stopped taking the pictures, but I took a lot of them. It's about inter-process communication. I don't remember really well where I put this. It was on C++. A network. It's basically this book from Richard Stevens, Unix Programming. And ChatGPT recommended me this book, so that's why I was reading. There's a bunch of stuff here. So I think like it works more on a server client kind of way than Godot works. So the URL is like more, it's closer to an actual URL that you would have on a client. And then the way that it works is probably like opening an actual protocol of communication between the application, which is the process, and the kernel. I think the Qt works more in this way, but Godot works more on the string kind of way. I don't know very well how to bridge the gap. So maybe I should ask ChatGPT. Trying to think about whether or not it makes sense to expand on this one. I think that this is probably when you have a worker on the task already, for whatever reason it calls again. Or maybe when you switch tabs and then you go back to the previous one, or something like that. Like you start the worker and then you do something else, and then the task is still running, the work is still running in the background, and then you go back to the thing, and then it calls the function again, but we already have the worker. I think that's probably that. Then it's gonna hit this worker on hold thing. So the question is obviously, do I need to try to do something like this on Godot or not? So I'm just gonna put the like kind of like a comments on here. Then I'm gonna go back to the other thing. So take worker. Blah, blah. So it's not gonna have the worker. So this is going to. This is from the take worker from John. Yeah. So the URL is the thing that I have to look into Qt. But I think that's probably better to like clarify this one first and have the flowchart. Then I go through Qt and then I try to clarify. So I think that what this is doing is they keep the workers on a so they keep I'm gonna write this down there. They keep the workers on a hash on a cache using this hash. And then they use this iterator pattern to find the so they're basically mapping they map the URL path to the to workers or to the worker. If there is already a worker for that URL, so it returns that worker. This is probably something that I should do as well. So they use hash map. Color is very hard to see. I think that they returned this. So yeah, if there isn't, probably so this probably is check to see if there is a worker or not. So if there isn't, it returns a null pointer. So take worker for a job. And if there is, the value probably is the worker, which is the class, the pointer. So this one is going to check to see if there is a worker, and if there isn't, then it's if there is, it sets up the worker and then calls start a job. So I think both of this, like, this is most likely gonna run on most of the times is only when something weird happened to prevent crashes, blah blah blah. Yeah, so I'm gonna put. So now let's follow the wait worker thing. They're gonna accept this protocol. Oh, so this is on a queue. Okay, so it's gonna loop over a queue. So it keeps jobs. I'm gonna write this down. And maybe this should be on top here. So probably that's what I'm gonna do as well. So there's so one of the questions that I have is why creates a scheduler class and a queue class. So like, what is the point of the scheduler? So I think that is probably because there is a one-to-many relationship. So like the scheduler is like the overall manager, and then each queue is for. But I think this queue has the queue has many jobs. So I have to clarify the relationship, I think, first. So I'm gonna ask this to ChatGPT to see what it thinks. But I think that this is probably one of the most important things. So I have to clarify the relationship between the classes, so I can think about the design that I'm gonna try to do on Godot. I think it's gonna be probably like one scheduler, then multiple queues. Each queue has multiple jobs, and then the jobs can have multiple workers, I think. So I'm gonna ask on queue. So yeah, the queue holds the work. Oh, this is a map of queues. So it loops over a map of queues. And the host queue is the one that has the. Oh, starting job here. It's kind of hard to see because it's in the middle of the thing. So I think that the queue is the one that has the job. So it has a map of queues. Each queue has a job, I think. Take first in the queue. I don't know why excalidraw is doing this stuff. So guess the first job on the queue. Then it uses that starting job to see if it's the worker. Worker for job. Should probably do this. And let's see if I can connect the starting job there on top to this one. I think, yeah. Oh, the starting job is gonna be the one that's initialized on the queue. It's kind of annoying because it's like crossing the thing. Oh, it's whatever. So if it doesn't use the job, why does it matter? The job is just for the error on the when it creates. So it probably uses on the other one. Yeah, so when it starts the job, it passes. So the job matters for this one. Not sure if that's kind of redundant. I think I'm just gonna put this other function here. I wanna put proto q here. And then I'm gonna put this other one. Just put it on top here. Oh, why is excalidraw is doing this glitching stuff? It's kind of annoying. Well, this is the one that obviously assumes gonna create the job for the first. That's true. So let me see this first. So obviously most of the time it's gonna be this one. So it connects the worker with the worker died signal. Then this is probably the private scheduler there. It's gonna run this callback, which is a lambda, which passes the worker as an argument, and then signals or does this function on the worker. Which is probably gonna stop the worker, I think. So it removes the job from the queue and then deletes the worker. So I think that doesn't matter that much. It does matter, but More interested on the way that it works on the optimizations. I guess this is the first, like, one of the main priorities I have is to understand how does it optimize the speeds, and like how does it progressively load the directory so that it doesn't stall in the beginning. That's what I'm trying to figure out. It might be related. It's obviously related, but not sure if it is very important, this protocol. Because this protocol might be related to the stuff that I was saying before, that's like the way that the URL works on Qt on the protocol is like a different way to communicate with the. I think it's like a process communicating with the kernel, probably what is happening. We're not really sure. So the easiest way is just to ask ChatGPT as well. Because like the stuff that matters to me is obviously not like this specific implementation. Is more like I think that the thing that matters the most is to understand like because I'm probably gonna have to build from the ground up. Let's say like I'm not gonna use the code that I have here. So I have to think about like how like what's API. I assume that obviously like on the different OSs there are gonna be APIs to communicate with the kernel. And I think what I have to do is figure out what APIs they are using here, like how is this process of communication works on the protocol from the first principles perspective, then try to implement the APIs myself if they don't exist on Godot already. So I'm not really sure if it's worth it to spend a bunch of time like trying to figure out the protocol, and maybe I should ask ChatGPT. I think that's probably a better idea. So ask ChatGPT about the QRL and the protocol. Then like try to use ChatGPT to superficially find the relevant information, the keywords and stuff like that. Then use Perplexity to search the information. And then I don't spend a bunch of time. Yeah, whatever. So I'm seeing if there's anything interesting here. Find the KIO worker using Q plugin loader. This is very interesting. So this might be important, probably. This is something that I was thinking about before as well. Like because one way to optimize, you have a limited amount of time on the game loop, let's say. So one way to optimize would obviously be to like make it as efficient as possible to execute like the most amount of time during the frame you have for each cycle. But another way to optimize would be to just create a bunch of different processes. But I'm not really sure this is something that people do a lot, or like if it's a kind of bad practice. Because then obviously the way that I was thinking is that like regardless of what happens, the overall hardware is gonna have like a window for everything that happens on the cycle, because the hardware itself is also a cycle. It's like a game loop. So inside of the overall game loop is gonna be bounded by the constraints of the hardware, and then it's gonna be bounded by the constraints of the CPU. And So like this is gonna be the initial time frame you have for executing anything that's gonna happen. But then obviously, inside of the time frame, the first layer is gonna be the kernel, and then there's gonna be the OS, the GUI from the OS. So you have the kernel, the GUI from the OS, like uh, that is subtracted from the overall time you have to render this stuff. And then there's going to be the management of the OS with the different processes. And I think that, and the relationship between the processes and the dynamic linked libraries. The shared libraries are going to be the processes that are used across different, across other processes as well. So like what happens if you, so for the process, I think there is a time limit for how much stuff you can execute each cycle. But then what happens if you use like a bunch of different processes? Like, because each processes is gonna have its own time limit. So it would be like, so for example, on the stuff there, like if you load a simulation or something, or like if you do the file system on a different process than the overall scene, then it's kind of like they are two different things, and then it frees up space on the other stuff to execute each cycle. So I think that there's probably something similar to what they're doing here, since they like finding executables. So it might be like a different thing, the worker. And then they just load they run like, is a process running another process basically. So it uses Qt to find the executable. So I have to open Qt. And then this, so it uses this queue process to set a program. So that's exactly what they're doing, I think. They use Qt to find the executable that has the code for the worker, and then they use this queue process to start that process. And each process has a process ID, which is the way that the operating system figures out what is the process, I think. So this happens after initialize the worker already. So this probably starts the process with the PID there, and then connects the worker with the process. It's weird that I guess it doesn't matter. Like this, it only uses this to start the execution, and then probably the process ID is the only thing that matters after that. And then communicates with directly with the operational system, because it doesn't hold this anywhere. So I think that the actual thing here doesn't matter. It's just Godot has something similar. I think I'm 100% sure that Godot has functionality to create a new process, because that's what happens when you run the game. They use some classes I don't remember. I'm obviously gonna go through the flow again to figure out how they do that. But they basically initialize another process as well when you're running the game, like from the editor. So I guess I can just try to reuse the functionality and do basically the same thing. But then instead of starting the game, I start this worker. But it's gonna be annoying. So because the problem with this obviously now is that I'm not really sure like how does it work. Because I'm gonna have to, like, it might be something like I'm gonna have to see. I assume that probably is open source, the code for the worker. There's probably gonna be another repository, and I'm gonna have to look into the repository to see how the worker is implemented. Then so I think the first thing that I should do is just like try to simplify as much as possible the relationship. I think the thing that matters the most is the relationship between classes. Then figure out where the optimizations are, which is probably on the worker. and then figure out how to translate that to Godot. So the thing that matters in the beginning is the like from the flow. I should just forget about all of the like the data that is being passed through the functions and just focus on the class structure and then try to filter or figure out which parts of the code are related to the optimizations. So also like the process, I think this like clarifying what they mean, clarifying how the communication works. This is one of the main things. I'm gonna put this on the list later of things should do. But I think right after this first step here should probably just create the class already on Godot. They should create it's probably the same design because obviously I assume that they know better than me about this stuff. So I should probably try to follow the same design in the beginning and then, or maybe I should try to remove as much stuff as possible. Should try to simplify as much as possible. And then from that point, but I should have like in mind, I should keep in mind the overall design, the relationship between classes. So I can create the structure. And I should see, I think that the class, but it seems that the class that is connected directly with the core there is going to be the job and not the scheduler. So like the job is the one that is connected directly with in this part, I think is the one that is weird. So like the class that matters. So as far as I'm thinking, this is going to be the model that I have there on on Godot, the K card there lister. So like the entry points. So like the front end is the file system doc on Godot. So the file system doc is going to communicate with a new class that I created, which is the presenter, which is going to communicate with the model, which is on the original one is editor file system, like the backend for Godot. So I think in the beginning it doesn't communicate. In the beginning, the file system presenter runs the constructor, and then when the file system on the constructor of the model probably is going to be the starting points on my logic. So the file system model is going to be the coordir lister, and then the URL is going to be the path of the roots. If there is a roots on the cache that I'm going to have there. So that class is going to have to connect directly with the job, I think, since that's the way that they do it here. So this is something that is confusing to me as well, because here they have some stuff related to the visualization. So I'm not really sure if they do the front end on this class as well. Because the way that ChatGPT explained, I think, in the beginning, is that Dolphin is the main framework that creates the file system. And then Dolphin uses Qt and KIO. It's the bridge between the two, basically. So Qt is the stuff on the front end, and KIO is the stuff on the back end, which I think is still true, but like the connection of the relationship, like the structure of the projects is not very clear. Because I think that KIO, obviously, based on the way that it is here, is gonna communicate directly with Qt. Sure. So it's as if like they have the front end of them on what would be the model class on my part. But I think it doesn't matter that much because like it doesn't need to be the same. So I think I'm just gonna ignore this part. But so this is the part that is weird. So if the main class there connects with the job, I guess the job connects with the scheduler. But then how? I think it's a circular thing probably. Yeah, so it's probably like jobs. Then the jobs have the scheduler. Then the scheduler has the queue. Yeah, so it's jobs first, then scheduler. Then scheduler has this queue. And the queue starts the job. So maybe they are passing through dependency injection, because I'm not, like I said, like too much stuff to pay attention at the beginning, so I'm not paying attention on the variables because it's very annoying to track the flow of data as well. So I'm just paying attention to the structure first and trying to clarify the connection of things. So I'm not really sure if he's gonna pass like the first job as dependency injection, like because it is initializing the constructor inside of the jobs. The scheduler maybe is a member variable of the, so it's kind of like composition, member variable of the jobs. And then the scheduler initializes the queue. But the queue, oh, you puts everything on a map, I think. Like the map that I wrote there. So the queue starts a job. And then the job has a worker. And this part is the one that is confusing. It's like, what is the relationship here? So like, what is the difference between the job in the beginning and the job that the queue starts? And how is the job? So like, so this part I'm pretty sure obviously is going to run the constructors first. Then initialize everything inside the constructors up until it gets here. So this part is the one that I have to see. I think that this job is different than the first one. But then I'm pretty sure that jobs is gonna start the worker, like the last part that I was doing here. So initialize the worker outside of the job. And the worker is actually done on the scheduler, but they connect through the functions, I think. So this is a member variable, I think, of the proto queue. So the worker is a member variable of the queue. So maybe the queue is not connected to jobs, it's connected to the worker directly. It's just the name start job. And it's gonna find the job through the map here, I think. So it's probably like yeah, but it is kind of weird. So I have to clarify what is exactly, because the problem I think is on the flow there. It doesn't. I think it's initialize everything as a singleton, or not as a singleton, but initialize outside. So like on the functions there that I'm looking at, it doesn't initialize. Like there isn't the constructor of the scheduler. It just calls the function from the actual class instance. Just kind of like a separate thing, instead of creating an object from the class and then calling from the object. So I have to. So maybe I think I'm gonna go back off stream and I'm going to clarify like what is the. So I should probably look for to check if it is a member, if like what is the relationship between the class basically. But I think that so like the job is gonna be inside of the queue. So this is kind of like a circular thing. So this probably, yeah, I think the queue is initialized inside of the scheduler. So that's the part that's kind of weird. So I think the question would be, one of the questions would be how does it put the jobs on the queue, but I'm not really sure if it's worth it to spend a bunch of time trying to figure this out. I think it's easier to just use ChatGPT to like get the simplest version possible. Because I don't think I'm gonna do. Maybe I should do exactly the same, but I'm not really sure if it matters that much. Like this relationship is just for the beginning there. It doesn't matter that much, I think. But I think it's good to try. I think I'm just gonna superficially use GPT to try to clarify, like whether or not the jobs that exist inside of this queue are the jobs that create the scheduler. So like it creates the job, then creates the scheduler from the job. Then the scheduler creates the proto queue, and then it puts this parent job inside of the queue. And then it uses that to, like the queue is the one that initializes the worker, but it's gonna bridge the gap between the queue using the jobs. So like this, the queue connects the job with the workers, I think. Mm. So this obviously is going to depend on what kind of job you have there, I think. So I guess the question that I have to clarify is how does it put the jobs on the map first, or put the jobs on the queue? And this might be annoying because it's related to the overall design of the whole thing. So that's why I'm trying to avoid spending time looking at this, because I might have to understand then like how does what is the connection between the dolphin and the thing, like in the whole life cycle of the whole thing, instead of just paying attention to what I'm trying to figure out, which I want to avoid. So I'm probably just gonna use ChatGPT to ask. So it's probably this function here, queue job. So it's probably in the beginning, their job. Oh, so this is the one that runs after the scheduler. But then it's weird because like it is looping over the queues first. So I have to see what happens when it doesn't have anything on the queue. But I think in that case it doesn't do anything. So that's the part that is kind of weird. And this job here, I think it is the job that you use to initialize there. Initialize the job that passes there as an argument to these functions as inside of one of the functions. But that's the relationship. I use a function that is a member of a class to initialize the class. So like this job private, this new job here, this function is gonna create an instance of the list job private, I think. And then it's basically passing through the constructor this the class. The new, so I think that this is basically the function. So this function calls this function here, and this is the class, the other class. Just initializing this instance, the instance of the class here, inside of this function, and passing this as an argument to the new list job. And this is going to be the argument that passes through the constructor here. So the job that passes here is the one that is the list job private that it creates on the beginning. And then it goes all the way to the thing, I think. What is Q here? I think Q might be like one of the stuff on Qt, like the pointer on the class. So I have to figure out what is Q, because Q is probably the job. So I think it is different jobs. So it's gonna initialize from here, and this Q is gonna be the one that uses there later. I think it's different jobs. So I'm gonna stop streaming now. I'm gonna continue to figure this out off stream. Probably next time, just gonna continue to do this thing here. So clarify the KIO, Qt libraries, and Dolphin to figure out the optimizations from first principles. Then once you figure it out, try to implement the optimizations on Godot. So see you next